Five Nights at Freddy's is one of the most influential games of all time. That's not a sarcastic statement either. It's really crazy how big this franchise blew up and how many developers got inspired by it. Not by the game itself, I'm talking the mad cash this franchise raked in. There's a bunch of games, a continuous book series, a bunch of merchandise, and a movie coming out this month. Or at least I think it's coming out this month. I'm writing the script in June, so who the hell knows if I'm gonna actually make that deadline. There's a massive fan base too, with many talented creators, artists, and animators. People like Mando Pone, no, not him. John Acro, shit, wait, not him either. Squimpus McGrimpus, god damn it! Squimpus McGrimpus, more like Squimpus McDiddles. Little kids. Seriously, why is there so many people in this community looking to engage in sex acts with children? Like, come on, this is Five Nights at Freddy's. You're supposed to kill them. Well, the point is that there's a lot of fans of the franchise, and it's still going strong today. Not so long ago, they announced Help Wanted 2, which is pretty cool. The fact that this franchise was able to do all this in just 9 years is crazy. Oh yeah, this franchise is 9 years old now, by the way. The scythe inches ever closer. Since it's been so long, I wanted to go all the way back to where it began, with the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. It's funny, the original game doesn't really get talked about as much anymore. Most people focus on like the newer stuff, as well as shit talking the lore. What the fuck is a mimic? I wanted to go ahead and replay the game after all this time and really dig deep into the design aspect and everything that made it special. It's been a long time. I haven't played this game since it was released 9 years ago. Let me tell you, this game scared the shit out of me. I couldn't get past night 3 because I had my eyes closed half the time. I was never really much of a horror guy. When I was 4, I played that SpongeBob movie game, and the final slide level I played with my eyes closed because the scuba diver would make me cry when he popped out. But now that I'm older, I can confidently say that absolutely nothing has changed. I still can't play these games without being a nervous wreck. Look at me rapidly flipping through the cameras like a madman while frantically looking at both of my doors being shut. On night 1, I had to have my brother accompany me while playing this so I could actually get through this game without having a fucking stroke. It was actually kind of interesting because he also played the game as well, and watching him play was like a completely different world from mine. While I was freaking out at JPEGs, he was very calm and collected, and we were able to get through it very easily. So I kind of have two viewpoints here. My own, where you freak out like a bomb diffuser with anxiety, and my brother, who was able to play through it more mechanically. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about both. I think I'll start with the basics of the gameplay since, I'm sure no one knows what that's like. It is a niche franchise after all. You only have 3 tools: the lights to check if there's animatronics at your door, the doors to keep them from getting in, and the cameras to keep an eye on all these guys. All of these use power, which you have a limited amount of throughout the night. I'll go in depth with the animatronics first, since they are what you're trying to avoid after all. Chica and Bonnie are the most basic. Every once in a while, they'll move to adjacent rooms from the ones they're currently in, Bonnie on the left and Chica on the right. You just gotta keep track of their movements with the camera to see how close to the office they're getting. They'll keep moving closer and closer until they get to your door, and then you have to shut it, otherwise they'll give you an over-enthusiastic welcome into the afterlife.
Welcome to our club! Welcome to our club! Welcome Squidward! Welcome Squidward! Welcome Squidward! Welcome Squidward!
Foxy is somehow even more simplistic. He's always in one spot, and if you're not checking your camera, he'll inch closer and closer until eventually he'll make a beeline to your office while you have to shut the door and he'll bash on it, taking some power. You really want to prevent Foxy from reaching that point. Not only can it take you off guard and potentially end your game, but even if you do close the door in time, he could take such a large chunk of energy it'll end your game with a blackout anyway. Finally, you have Freddy. He's the most complicated out of them all. Basically, like Chica and Bonnie, Freddy will slowly make his way to your office on the right side of the building, but unlike these two, he will never go back to a room that he was already in. If he manages it to make like this corner of the room, he'll stay there for the rest of the game, being a continuous nuisance. Freddy and Foxy basically force you to check your cameras to try to prevent their movements, because otherwise if they didn't, then you could just check the lights on each side occasionally to see if Bonnie and Chica make their way to the office, which would make for a pretty boring game. It's like that one moment in Yume Nikki where you have to keep flickering the lights on and off until this lady turns into a demon.
Oh, brother!
That's the animatronics, but they're only the first half. Now it's time to talk about you. You're the security guard, and as I've been saying, you got cameras to watch. You can't really move from your spot because your legs went numb and trying to stand on it hurts. All you can really do is just, as I've been saying, check the cameras for the animatronics, and if they get too close, you shut the door so they can't get in your office. Keep that up for 6 hours and you get past the night. Now you may be asking, can't you just like keep the doors shut the whole night? Of course not, you fucking idiot. That uses power, and since you only have a limited supply, you can't really keep them shut. In fact, everything uses power. The doors, the lights, the camera, the fan. Everything you do will deplete energy faster, so you gotta be careful. You want to use the camera, but you can't use it too much, otherwise you'll lose too much power. I think you're starting to see how this game comes together to make the whole thing work. When you really think about it, there isn't a whole lot going on. You're stationary. You rarely see the animatronics moving. Hell, since you have to be careful not to use the cameras too much, half the time you're just staring at this lovely room being cooled down by a fan. Why the fuck does he have that thing on anyway? Isn't it like the middle of the night? Shouldn't it be naturally cold? Does this game take place in like Arizona in the middle of July?
What kind of place is this?
Have I finally cracked the lore? Oh yeah, the lore. I should mention that I'm not going to talk about the lore at all in this video because I don't give a shit. Not a whole lot is actually happening in the game, but what is happening is very condensed, and a lot of stuff is constantly overlapping with each other, mostly being the power. You want to use the cameras, but you can't use too much energy. You should only shut the doors when it's absolutely necessary, same with the lights. Gotta keep track where everyone is, but there's 4 of them, and they all have their own ways of moving and their own rules. When you're checking the cameras, you're not looking at the doors. When you're looking at the doors, you're not checking your cameras. Everything you do is at conflict with one another, and that's how the game makes it feel like a lot is happening when much isn't really going on. It's very clever in how it's all laid out. Over the course of the game, the animatronics will start moving more frequently and you just have less power to work with overall, meaning that you really have to start being careful how to spend your resources. When you think about it, its structure is very similar to something like Papa's Pizzeria. In that game, you take orders, put on toppings in the right spot, cook it the right amount of time, and then cut them correctly. These are very simple actions individually, but the customers will come in at random, inconvenient times, want you to cook them different amounts. You can only put toppings and cut pizzas one at a time, so when you take one out, you gotta be quick about it. Oh, and when you finish, you gotta make sure you have the right order on the side here, otherwise you'll accidentally give it to the wrong customer. Simple tasks that are always at odds with each other. I don't know if these type of games have a name, but I've always called them management games. You're one person overlooking plenty of moving parts, and you gotta try to keep them in order, otherwise you'll fail horribly. Now, everything I've said up to this point about the game was very basic surface level stuff, most of which is things that the phone guy in-game will tell you about. But there are a lot smaller things happening in the background, a lot you might not even pick up on as actual gameplay elements since they're very subtle and can be easily taken as just the game fucking with you, when it's actually details that'll help you keep track of everything easier. It's like a therapist. Imagine going to the therapy office and when you walk into the room, you just see Freddy sitting there. He's like wearing glasses. The game is very quiet, with a lot of ambient sounds that'll be heard throughout the night. What you might not know is that some of them actually has some useful information. The most obvious example is when you hear pots and pans clattering around. That means Chica's in the kitchen, tripping all over that shit. So you're able to pinpoint the location of one of the animatronics without needing to check the camera and save some power, which is very useful. Like I said, it's the most obvious example. It's probably the one the game uses to try to clue you into the fact that listening for unique audio cues can actually help you throughout the night. Freddy has one of his own too, but it's much more subtle. When you get into the later nights, you can start to hear Freddy laughing. On the surface, it just seems like another creepy sound that randomly plays in the night to remind you that the animatronics are there and that they're coming for you. But Freddy's laugh is actually a very useful detail that it signals that he moved into another room, and that he's now closer. I'm pretty sure that Freddy takes the same path every time, so you can use the laugh to keep track of which positions he's in without ever checking in on him. It's like you have one of those like baby listeners or whatever the fuck you call them. Granted, that's more of a tip for the 420 mode, since even on night 6, it's probably in your best interest to keep him from getting close to your office at all, but still, if you hear it, then you know he's moved. You get the point. Amongst all the miscellaneous sounds, there are ones that can help you out, and you need to be able to pinpoint which one is tied to some kind of action and which one is just a random hallucination you're hearing in your head because you're crazy. These are very useful. When my brother was playing through the game, he actually got to night 5 pretty easily since we were able to use a lot of these little tricks and details to our advantage. Take Freddy for example. There's something that you can do where as long as the camera 2B is being watched when he's in the corner, he can't enter your office. Ever. So as long as you like close the door before checking other cameras and then putting the camera back on 2B when you're done, Freddy can't really do anything. You just basically lock him into place for the rest of the night. Granted, you still want to try to prevent him from getting there at all since closing your door and checking your camera can consume a lot of power, especially on later nights, but it's still a very useful strat that actually got us through night 4.
What I found most interesting about playing the game is how differently the experience can be whether or not the horror aspect affects you. For me personally, it affected me greatly. Even though I know how the animatronics work, the moment I lose track of them, my nerves are shot and I go on a spiraling paranoid breakdown that results in me using too much power and ultimately a game over. The atmosphere in this game is really masterful. It does so much with very little.
Like the title screen alone does a good job just settling you into the experience you're about to face. Like you boot up the game and immediately you're like, ah! Copyright notice.
And of course, since this game takes place in the middle of the night, everything's incredibly dark and it can be really hard to see the animatronics when they move around. This is why I lose track of them so easily. Like, look at Freddy here. The only thing that's really visible is his beady little eyes. Doesn't help that the cameras are all staticky and shit. And of course, they're trying to mess with you every chance they get. Like, sometimes they'll shove their whole fucking face into the camera. They'll have their head twitching, and when they get close, they say some like distorted shit. I'm peeing my pants right now. I'm so scared. You just can't hear it because I'm not wearing any pants. I think what makes it even freakier is the fact that it's also quiet. The sounds are so subtle so that if something big does happen, like the camera's feeds cutting out, it'll shake you up a bit. The game will occasionally have these moments where the screen flickers with Freddy's face and words will appear and distortion in the sounds. There's no music whatsoever either. Night Guard didn't even decide to bring like earphones or anything, not even a Walkman. Remember when every YouTuber on the planet was sponsored by Raycon? What was that all about? The atmosphere really plays into why this game successfully freaks me out so much. Still, it's odd that I'm so jittery despite that. Like, I understand how everything works.
It's not like Freddy's gonna jump out of my screen and try to convert me to Scientology.
So I don't know why it affects me so well. It's not just the jump scares either. While they definitely play a part in why my anxiety is so high. This happens with any horror game really. Hell, even a game like Portal could keep me on edge. I'll go over the jump scares, but I'll save them till the end because I kind of feel like they tie the whole thing together. The other kind of experience FNAF can offer is the one that you're not really affected by any of the horror jump scares like my brother. It can still be fun trying to micromanage everything and perfect your use of power using neat little tricks to try to make it through the night. I'm pretty sure that plenty of people have done no death runs where they play through all 7 nights without dying once, abusing the mechanics and the AI, optimizing everything you can do. I think that's also a big reason why FNAF is so fun. Even without the horror aspects, even removing the atmosphere and the jump scares, you can still have a fun time figuring out the game and trying to get through the nights. The custom night mode, especially 420, really pushes this to the extreme. Like at that point, you're really not playing for the horror or to survive. You're just playing to show this game's who's boss. It's you. You've been appointed as the new CEO. Congratulations. It's very interesting to be at this point when the smoke has died down and all the mirrors have been sold off to a thrift shop. All the game's secrets have been revealed. I imagine for many people this might completely ruin what makes the game special or interesting. The mystery behind it all. I mean, the game is designed so the animatronics are hard to understand with inconsistent movements. The main focus is to try to react to everything and try to adapt to a bad situation. Like breaking the game open might be fun for many, but I do have to wonder if that just makes the game lose its appeal. I mean, it didn't for me. I still get scared shitless. But I also realized I'm kind of a pussy and that most normal people probably wouldn't be that badly affected by it. At the same time, that's not really the game's fault. It didn't ask to be torn open and looked at. It's still the same as ever. That's more of an opinion thing though. Nothing I can really comment on. It's just interesting how differently a game can be viewed once the curtains behind it have been revealed.
I guess it's finally time that I talk about the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the bear in the room. Oh shit. The jump scare is a staple of the franchise. Every game has plenty of them to varying quality. They can be a very cheap way to get a scare out of someone, usually used by people whose most knowledgeable horror experience is talking back to their mom. And for the most part, I agree. Like, in a movie, when you see a jump scare, sure, it might freak you out, but good luck trying to get me again on rewatch. It's why it's easier for me to watch FNAF Let's Plays than play them, since I know exactly when the jump scares will happen thanks to the timeline. Don't even get me started on jump scares in books. Like, by God, it's pathetic. But with FNAF, I do think there is one very big difference here compared to my other examples, is that the jump scares in this game only happen when you fail. The whole point, everything you do, is to avoid this very outcome from happening. They are the driving force for you to do well, while also causing anxiety for you to fuck up. It's basically the equivalent of losing a life in another game, but instead of a life, it's your life. Also, and I admit this is probably an unpopular opinion of mine, but I just think they're fun. Like, you could still argue it's just a cheap tactic to make weak horror games stronger, but not every horror game needs to be some kind of psychological trauma fest. At the end of the day, it is a video game, and its job is to be fun, and ultimately, I think the jump scares are both well incorporated and fun. Not only that, but something I picked up on is that in this game, the jump scares very rarely just happen out of the blue. Whenever my brother or I failed, we knew a few good seconds beforehand that it was coming. The game actually has a lot of little tells that give you a sign that the jump scare is about to happen. Foxy running down the hallway is a pretty obvious one. If you're unable to shut off the light or close the door, that means Bonnie or Chica has made it into your office. If you're in your camera and you hear like a dry breath, that means one of them is right behind your camera, and they'll get you the moment you put the camera down. That's not the sound a chicken makes. It should be like bakak or something like that. Well, now that I talked about the jump scares, this kind of brings us to the end. To be honest, I expected this video to be a bit longer, but the game overall is quite simple. Like me, just add a ton to that. A ton of weight. Five Nights at Freddy's is the epitome of less is more. It doesn't do much, but what it does do, it does very, very well. And like I said, it's also a bit flexible in how you can approach it. You can play it as a spooky horror game and get lost in the atmosphere, or you can play it like an insane person. Five Nights at Freddy's success is also very interesting. We've seen many indie games become breakout hits, but never really to this level. Like, it's a full-blown franchise with a bigger IP than some of the largest video game companies, like F-Zero. Nobody remembers F-Zero, especially not my grandma, because, you know, she has dementia. I can understand why though. A simple premise that's well executed can take you a long way. It's also interesting to know that it's Scott's like 10th millionth game. Like look at this list here. He's made a lot of games for a long time. My favorite being Bogart 2, Return of Bogart, when Ricard gave that speech to Bogart. You know what, fuck the joke, I don't give a shit. It shows you to never give up. Like it can take literal years before you finally get that success you're looking for. You gotta keep trying, keep going, press forward. Five Nights at Freddy's will always be special and inspired so many others to the point that it created its own genre, mascot horror. And the fact that it was all created just by one dude, it's crazy. It's really inspiring for anyone. If you keep pushing and work hard enough, maybe you'll make something like Scott did. Yeah, probably not.